Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. This is one of the painting I did for 1,000 painting challenge. I do paint daily and it ended up pretty good. Before I get on to it, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. As far as drawing, I try to keep it really simple as possible, and I try to draw really light as possible. I don't put that much pressure on my pencil, and I try to, whenever I do any kind of drawing for my painting, I try to draw freely because that kind of keeps, in my creative space, as I say, because you could see when I draw, like literally I don't take my pencil out from the watercolor paper. I'm just keep sketching, and I'm also constantly comparing the objects where I put in. Like sometimes I try to change my references, because sometimes as an artist you have to come up with some composition elements that works with the painting and what works and what doesn't work. You can see I'm also adding a little bit of streetlights here and there, so that also helps to create a little bit of depth in our painting as well. And I'm trying to put major areas and major blocking areas in my painting. I'm not going to draw each and everything. It's just like to see where everything sits and everything. Whenever you draw, make sure to draw from larger shapes to smaller shapes and tiny details. And when I started drawing way before, I go crazy with the details, but that's not the way to do painting. So once I finish my painting, I always start with the light wash. The light wash in watercolors would be with more water in it. The more water you put in it, and the less lighter it's gonna look like. You can see I started with sky wash. For the sky wash, I used Cobalt Blue, but as it comes down, I warm it up a little bit because this is the evening scene and there's going to be a lot of warmth in our painting as well. So I brought it all the way down. I also blocked in details for the background building as well. For that, I used a little bit of Cerulean Blue and a little bit of Payne's Gray would work on it. So the foreground building, I'm using Cadmium Orange and a little bit of burnt umber in my painting, and I'm keep building it up. You could see everything what I'm painting, I'm trying to connect the shapes as much as possible, because that is really imperative. You have to connect your shapes in your painting, or else it looks like it's belonging somewhere. And as it comes to the foreground, I always make my foreground a little bit darker and stronger, because that helps to the viewers to get into the painting. So that's going to act as a lead-in for us. So for that, I used Payne's Gray and a little bit of Winsor Wild in it. This is like something sometimes people get frustrated. Once you put a paint, the watercolor blends by itself. That's a beautiful thing about it, and it's also a curse at the same time, because you're doing a painting, then it blends with itself and it creates the ugly marks on a painting. To avoid that, as a beginner, sometimes what you could do, once you finish the first wash, dry it out a bit, then use your mid-tones and darker tones. That will help more. So since my foreground building dried quite a bit, so I'm going to increase the pigment consistency in my foreground building. For that, I'm using burnt umber and cadmium orange. As it comes down, I'm going to increase the pigment consistency. So I'm putting a lot of Payne's Gray on top of it, and I also used Winsor Violet as well. So this brush I started using recently. This brush, really gives a really sharp flat details in my painting. I don't use this brush that often, but sometimes I do. It kind of works pretty good on certain details as well. And you could see I added a darker detail at the top. It is super dark, so I used my nails to get that eyelets back, so I don't have to paint white paint on it. And I'm trying to put in some colors here and there, and I'm spraying some water to get some texture on my foreground building as well. So now I'm focusing on the midground building, and as you can see in the midground building, my values is a little bit lighter. I kept them midground building value is a little bit lighter because I want to create a distance from foreground to the background. As a painter, you have to tell a story, and you have to, if you want to create a distance and a depth in your painting, and if you want to create any kind of moody paintings, you have to have a different range of values in your painting to convey it. In reality, if you see a picture, if you take a picture and see it, it might look darker in distance, and even in reality, if you look, it might look darker, but the traditional painting is all about creating distance and pushing things further and further away. So I jumped on into painting people. When I paint people, I always make sure to create an impression and not to add all the details in the people's faces or anything like that. Now I jumped onto the cars. Even for the cars, you could see I connected all the cars by as one painting, because it's better to connect the shapes instead of having unconnected shapes. I also, like, there was no person riding a bicycle in my foreground. I thought it would be a really good measure figure for our painting to take us into the painting, and it also creates a really good foreground element for our painting, because all the things we're painting, it focuses on that person and the traffic lights above or above the cycle rider. So apparently in Toronto, the traffic lights are yellow, so that kind of gives a really good color in your painting. And the streetcars in Toronto are also red, so they have quite a lot of really good color theory when they created all those things. Now I'm started to focusing on a little bit of darker values on the cars. So for the car shadows, as soon as you add the shadows, everything pops out in the car. So now I'm going to add the street bolts. The one thing I hate doing while I paint, even though I've done a lot of paintings when I started this journey, the one thing that scares me till this day is putting a straight line. The mark have to be really confident stroke. If you mark it, you mark it. So sometimes I try to paint confident. Once I paint it, I don't go to that area that much because I hate fussing in my painting. You could see I created a little bit of street lights. The street lights are best for creating a depth in our painting, because it kind of gives directional lights, directional things in our painting. You could see as soon as I put the white bits, everything popped out in our painting. For the white bits, you could either use gouache or either you could use Chinese white. Both works, but I personally prefer gouache sometime. I personally prefer Chinese white sometime. It's up to artist preference, and you can do whatever you want. And it quite dried a bit in the foreground cars, so I'm going to add a little bit of details in the cars. And I also added street poles with Payne's gray. And this brush, I fell in love with it. This is a pinstripe brush where they used to create signs on lorries. They also use this brush for creating decals and cars too. And I'm using the wires as an opportunity to create distance using directional lines. If you want to create any kind of perspective, that would be the best thing to do. And there's nothing, it shows that adding a Canadian flag. So Canadian flag is also really good in color contrast, and it's red. I'm happy about it, so I used cadmium red for it. And there's also a little bit of white bit in it, and I left as it is. I didn't paint it. Now I'm adding some traffic lights, and there's also a parking sign. It's called green parking in Toronto. So this is a green sign. You can also park by paying. So now I'm adding so the cars, the only important thing about having cars is adding the headlights. As soon as you add headlights on the car, it shows that it's a car. I thought of adding a little bit of like orange light in the foreground, and since I have a red paint in my brush, so I also added on the guy in the front as well. So I'm also trying to bring back some of the eyelets in the car as well, because cars tends to get eyelets from top of the sky. So since I have a white brush again, since I'm going again, because it kind of dried out quite a bit when we did before, because sometimes the ground shadow of the car shows that it's properly grounded on the car. There's also a sign on top of the street light. I also added that using white paint. We are almost at end of our painting journey, and whenever you think what else you can add in your painting, that means you are done with your painting. This message was This message I heard from my two famous and exceptional artists I find my inspiration from. And now what I'm trying to do is add some street lights, and the lights are reflecting on the ground. But I did go and changed the orange light in the foreground car because it looked super light. Hope you guys learn few things here and there from this painting tutorial, and I try to give as much as information I can, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thanks again for watching this evening Moody painting video tutorial with me. Let me know what you guys learned from this video and what's your favorite color in this painting. If you have any other questions or subjects you want me to cover in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And good luck with your painting, folks.